Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
It is Wednesday, and all of our guests on this Wednesday brought to you by our title sponsor, Able Auctions and ableauctions.ca. I think you're way off the mark on this griddle versus grill barbecue situation, Ryan. Grill all the way. 100% Hockey Podcast. The host is John Shannon. He works with Darren Millard, NHL Analyst. He joins us now, as always, on a Wednesday. John, thanks for doing this, sir. How are you?
Hello, boys. Good to see you.
Sabres over the Canucks 3-2. I'm calling it the low point of the season, John. Even though last week was awful, the loss to the Jets and the Kings, they followed up, though, with that emotional win over the Edmonton Oilers. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But last night, against the last-place team that played the night before, you're up 2-1 at home in the third period. Does that not fall under the category of inexcusable, especially the way the season has gone?
Maybe the team should only play on Saturdays.
Yeah.
They seem to play really well on Saturdays. So, listen, that third period was as disappointing, I think, all season long. When you consider what the team has gone through. I thought for sure, to be honest, I thought the whole Tyler Myers, Connor McDavid scenario would galvanize the team. I thought the way they played on Saturday would galvanize the team. But I thought that the week before with the Toronto game and then going into Winnipeg and then losing at home to LA. So, there's no wonder that people get gray hair when they're around the game of hockey, because that had to be as frustrating a night as you've seen. And they had their chances. Luukkonen was good.
Yeah.
Let's face it, he was good. But they had their chances in the first two periods to put them away. It should not have been 2-1 at the end of two periods. It should have been 5-1.
Yeah.
And so then you have your cushion, but not to have the cushion. And, the other team plays professional hockey as well. Paterka is a great player. Kulich is a good player. Rasmus Dahlin, if you listen to people in Buffalo, they're as frustrated with Dahlin as Canuck fans are with some of their players. So, to me, I understand your frustration saying it's the low point. And if it isn't, it's pretty darn close.
Yeah. Rick Tocchet won the Adams Award last year, but there's no shortage of people wondering what the heck is going on this year. Is it the head coach? What's the word? You're in Toronto. What's the word on Rick Tocchet as a head coach in NHL circles outside of Vancouver?
Oh, no, I think there's a great deal of respect for Rick. I do. I think that there's a belief that he bridges the gap between old school and the modern coach. I think he's always respected for his communication skills. He's learned at the foot of a great deal of quality coaches, and Mike Sullivan's at the top of that list. So I have never heard at one point that any disrespect for Rick and the job he's trying to do in Vancouver. That's for sure.
John, where do you see this next move coming? It's been quiet here. We're waiting for either a massive trade or a medium-sized trade or a little one. We're not getting anything. Where is Jim Rutherford's patience, right? I mean, and Jim. Jimmy.
I do.
Go way back. It's got to be killing him what's happening right now.
Oh, I'm sure it's frustrating for everybody in the organization, and I have not talked to Jim for a while now. Certainly not since the LA game. I haven't been party to anything that's going on. But the challenge, Rick, has to be, Miller is a quality player, and if you don't get enough value back, then what are you doing? And that becomes the real challenge. I'm still of the belief, and maybe I'm a stubborn old coot. I'm still of the belief that, these issues can be solved and settled. But with every loss, it becomes a little bit more anxiety about what's going on and is the season lost. So I don't think there's any simple answer. I mean, you have to make sure that if you do trade either Miller or Pettersson or both, and I guess Miller's at the top of the list right now, that you get value, that you can make this team a playoff team this year. That has to happen. That's part of this mandate. I'm convinced of it. So if the deal's not right, you're not doing the deal. And that becomes a real frustration for everybody involved.
All right, some of the best fun this week was on Twitter. Canucks fans and Oilers fans going at it over McDavid and Garland. Your thoughts on McDavid, you know what, getting 3 games? Like, a lot of people thought he should have only been 1 or 2, but he got 3. Your thoughts?
Well, I thought it was going to be 2 for both of them. So what we're really arguing now is 1 game. We're arguing over the additional game. Is it worth it? Is it difficult to rationalize? Then I look at the last 2 suspensions of players. One for a slew foot, one for a hit to the head. Both were 3 games. Both obviously were intent to injure. So 3 games to me, perhaps George is trying to set a standard now to suggest that any time there's an attempt to injure. And, both Tyler and Connor got match penalties, which means there was a real belief there was an intent to injure. When you're trying to do the intent to injure, perhaps 3 games is supposed to be the standard, and that's where the league is going. And I have a difficult time arguing with that because there's many people in this league and around the league, including people in Vancouver, that say, have a standard, create something that's a standard for everybody, and we will live with it. What happens at this point is that you look at the officiating on the play. Was it the right officiating? No, it wasn't the right officiating. There should have been at least a delayed penalty being called. And then you get into the frustration. And that becomes a real challenge too. And with the time left in the game, the Oilers had the puck. The Canucks were never going to touch the puck. So nothing was going to happen. But you can't let a player get away with a cross check to the head. You can't. Yeah. And so I have very little sympathy for either Tyler Myers or Connor McDavid at this point.
Ryan, if you don't mind, the picture that what we talked about before the show of Tommy McVie. Have you got that by any chance? Okay. So you tweeted about this, and I wanted to get this in because he I know he's born in Trail, but did much of his growing up in East Vancouver alongside John Ferguson. They were rink rats, but he passes away at age 89. He coached the Devils, the Capitals, the Jets. This is going back to the 70s. 21 years in the minors. Boston Bruins ambassador. His name's on the Stanley Cup from 2011. But, John, your memories of what some people would call East Vancouver's Tommy McVie and Trails.
I'm not sure. So I first met Tommy McVie when he was in Winnipeg. And so it was early 80s, so 40 years ago. And so every time you met Tommy McVie in a press box or in a dressing room or around a rink somewhere, there was always a handshake. There was always, he used your name, and then he would tell you a funny story. Most of them are not repeatable on the air. Mm-hmm. But he would do that. And he, like when you talk about why people are in the game, and what makes people special and why you love the game of hockey, Tommy McVie's on that list. Tommy McVie made you feel better every time you talk to him. And you know, the amount of fun that Tommy had, particularly later in life when he was a scout, where there wasn't the pressure of winning and losing. I think that what really, in his later years, really embedded himself in the fabric of the game. And when I heard the news the other day, I couldn't help but say, you know, he was a friend to everyone, and everybody has a Tommy story, whether it be at the Coliseum in the old days or even the new arena or anywhere in the NHL. Tommy McVie would grab your hand, shake it, almost break it, and then make you laugh. And that's what he did all the time. He was a great person. And he was I tell you what, you're right about East Vancouver. You know that was a part of town. My dad grew up at 10th and Windsor in Vancouver, and you knew how tough the town was. And one of the things was that he played the game that way too as a player. And all the years that he played minor pro hockey, he didn't get credit for what he brought to the ice and the physical nature of his game.
Yeah, one of those players that spent so much time in the minors. If the league
Right.
if the NHL was larger, he probably would have been in the National Hockey League like his buddy Fergie was. So God bless Tommy McVie. My family, North Burnaby, East Van, they used to talk a lot about him. There was some connection there. And you mentioned the Coliseum and Rogers Arena. Don't forget about the Peony Forum. That's for Tom. Tom did his rink ratting, and same with John Ferguson. But I could go on and on. John, thanks so much for this. Appreciate it.
Cheers, boys.